For one reason or another, these players' values took a dip in week 5, but they've got the long-term upside we're looking for. I'm not here to waste any of your time. Here are 9 must-have trade targets as we roll into week 6. Let's start with Jaylen Warren, somebody who we highlighted as a potential breakout star early in the year should he take over the RB1 spot in Pittsburgh at some point. He competed with Najee Harris in the battle for touches this week. Harris had 15 touches to Warren's 12. But Warren was far more efficient both on the ground and through the air. Not to mention, this happened in a competitive divisional matchup that the Steelers won partially thanks to Warren's efficiency, so we can't blame this on garbage time. Efficiency has been the leading argument as to why this guy deserves a shot at the lead job in Pittsburgh, and that's why that argument's been made over the course of the last year plus. Warren beat out Harris by a whole yard per carry last year, spurring the idea of a shared workload between these two to begin with, and now here we are. Now, you do have an offense that is struggling for signs of life, with Harris's struggles being at the epicenter of that topic, and Warren just looks better. He's improving in his efficiency on a week-by-week basis, as we can see here, and he's just one reception behind George Pickens for the team lead in that category as well. So in PPR leagues, this obviously makes all the sense in the world to take somebody who was the RB25 at the time of this recording. On top of that, when you factor in his efficiency, volume, and what seems to be a slight increase in workload, you get consistent fantasy football production, things we like to see. Maybe we don't start somebody in a timeshare right away, considering that watching Pittsburgh's offense is like pulling teeth right now, but I do like the trajectory of Jaylen Warren's next few weeks far more than I like that of Najee Harris. Yet the fantasy market is not giving Warren his flowers just yet. So what does that mean for you? You go on and take advantage of that before everybody else starts to take note of what's happening between Warren and Harris. Go take advantage and trade for him. We've got Jonathan Taylor as our second option, and this one is kind of playing the psychological card. Taylor was advertised as being in line for a bounce-back year following an injury-riddled 2022. Many thought of that 2021 season when drafting Jonathan Taylor in the first few rounds of their fantasy drafts this year. Now imagine getting the news that Jonathan Taylor is not only missing the first 4 weeks, and he doesn't want to play with the Colts, but when he's finally back, we hear he's slowly being worked into his role. We aren't getting 100% of Jonathan Taylor until, let's say, week 8 or 9. Frustration has to be setting in for those fantasy owners. And on top of this, Zach Moss just exploded in week 5. Not only that, but now Moss has gone for 100 rushing yards in 2 of the last 3 contests. That's probably putting some fear and anger in Jonathan Taylor's fantasy owners. Well, this is the part where I tell you not to worry about it since you'll be getting Taylor. The Colts just signed this man to a 3-year, up to $42 million deal to make him the 3rd richest running back in the entire NFL. The Colts are not going to pay somebody that type of money and tell him to take a back seat to Moss in the long run, unless something wild happens. They have just made a massive investment in making Taylor the leader of their backfield, likely for the rest of his prime. Now, when you want to make this move, whether it's now or when Taylor is getting the full workload in a month, is up to you, but understand he is in line for his usual usage once that window is done. Make that trade and go to bed knowing that his volume situation for the future, unlike most, is public information. We are being updated on it. I would say go for him right now after Zach Moss just popped off in week 5, though. If I gave all of you $1 for every time I brought up Derrick Henry's age, the fact he's taken a step back, and the competition around him is getting better, you'd be rich and I'd be in crippling debt. After this week, this is confirmed as an ongoing storyline. Tyjae Spears saw greater than 50% of snaps for the 4th time in the last 5 weeks. He had a career-high 11 touches and found the end zone for the first time in his career. He also gave the Titans their only touchdown of the evening. This possible changing of the guard at the main running back position isn't as far along as the Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren storyline is quite yet. However, Spears' receiving upside is extremely appealing in PPR leagues. We have somebody with at least 4 targets in 4 of the last 5 weeks, and he's tied for the 3rd most targets on the team at 19. The injury issues with Treylon Burks are obviously helping his case in terms of usage as well. Even with the Titans unlikely to hand off Henry's workload in its entirety to Spears, there's plenty of opportunity here considering the subpar play that we've seen out of Ryan Tannehill as well. 2 touchdowns to 5 interceptions for Tannehill, and the Titans run the ball nearly 47% of the time. That's one of the highest rates in the league. So either the Titans continue to lean away from a struggling Tannehill, or they switch quarterbacks and likely ease that new QB in with a run-heavy scheme as well. Regardless, that's a tendency we see with new signal callers. We're going to see the Titans run the ball a lot. Let's go to Puka Nacua next. I have never seen so many Twitter fingers write somebody off just because of the appearance of another star. People are just saying that Nacua's production is dead in the water. I have news for a lot of you. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua do not have to be mutually exclusive. Sean McVay even came out and said that Nacua can have a similar role to what Robert Woods had with the Rams a few years ago. Now in 2019, to show you that this is sustainable, Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp both had a 1,000-yard receiving season. It was under Jared Goff, but Matthew Stafford has more of a reputation as a volume passer. People are still going to be scared that Nacua now shares the ball with somebody who had a 32% target share, the best in the league just 2 years ago. But Nacua set a record for the most receptions and receiving yards through a rookie's first 5 games. He had one of the best target shares, and he has been helping a lot of your fantasy teams, and I think that's still going to continue to happen. It's not just going to come to a grinding halt. Take advantage of this fear. Go get Nacua. People are horrified because Cooper Kupp is back. To say that Chris Olave's fantasy owners could be happier is a complete and utter understatement. Some may be scared of the stat line he put up this week, considering that if you pull the touchdown, he had a horrible game. Even with this touchdown, he still only put up 9 points in a standard PPR format. Now let's toss the context in. He was seen limping in pregame warmups, very clearly bruised up, and Derek Carr is averaging below 200 passing yards per contest and has battled injuries himself over the course of the last 3 weeks now. Context point number 2. The Saints embarrassed a Patriots team that has now been outscored 72-3 in the last 2 games, by the way. When you have a wide receiver on a team that wins 34-0, they're going to be factored out of the game sooner than later, and that's exactly what happened, okay? The Saints ran the ball 42 times and threw it on just 26 occasions. With all of that considered, Olave was still the second most targeted receiver. Carr threw in his direction 5 times. I know, not too exciting, but again, factor in that game script. With the new quarterback-wide receiver combo that is yet to acclimate to one another 100%, and also has been riddled with injuries on both sides, we need to look at the volume we've seen so far. Olave has been seeing almost 9 targets per game, and the writing is on the wall that when he and Carr are healthy, we should be in line to see some more explosive fantasy performances from the second-year receiver. Devonta Smith had a tough week against a Rams team that has actually been surprising a lot of people. The Rams are in the middle of the pack and allowing just over 200 yards through the air per game, and the Eagles went very old school in the second half and trying to grind out that clock. They ran the ball 39 times and threw it on 38 occasions. Dallas Goedert, who has been relatively silent throughout the first month, was the primary option with a team-high 9 targets, with the only receiving touchdown of the day for Philly. He broke out. Now, even with just the single reception for Devonta Smith, he did see some potential volume. He had 5 targets. He has hovered around a 20% target share rate, and yes, it isn't the most optimal scenario to be the secondary option on an already very run-heavy unit projected to be ahead in a lot of games. But folks, this is somebody who was a 1,000-yard receiver last year alongside A.J. Brown in the same climate. He is second on the team in red zone targets with a pair of them so far, and most importantly, we are not going to be seeing a whole lot of 1 or 2 reception games out of somebody with the skill set of Devonta Smith. This is somebody who had a performance that's well below his mean. Jump on the opportunity while you can. Jonnu Smith is likely the most under-the-radar pick on this list, but he's an important player to highlight considering how difficult it is to find consistent production at the tight end position. And honestly, he's probably a waiver wire pickup if you can submit your bid in time, but if not, here is my argument as to why you should buy him. Smith is tied for 8th in receptions among tight ends. He has 21 of them through the first 5 weeks. He's quietly the tight end 12 in standard PPR scoring formats, and we have seen at least 8.5 points from him 4 weeks in a row now. Smith also is tied with Kyle Pitts in red zone targets, despite the fact that Pitts is a much bigger guy at 6'6", while Smith is only 6'3". The main thing separating these 2 tight ends at the moment is their catch percentage. Jonnu Smith is seeing more high percentage throws from Ridder, hauling in 78% of his targets so far, while Kyle Pitts has racked in just 56% of his. He's seeing many more shots down the field, and with that comes risk, of course. This could be a compatible situation in all honesty when you consider the fact that Desmond Ridder has been taking a certain liking to his pair of tight ends. 40.3% of Ridder's throws have been to his tight ends. The 62 tight end targets on this Falcons team is by far and away the highest mark in the NFL. Pitts has been on the field for at least 60% of snaps in 4 of 5 games, while Smith has hit that mark in 3 of 5 games. This means, at least for now, that the success of one Atlanta tight end does not need to come at the expense of the other. Smith is well worth it here. Go get him. Sam Howell is a quarterback that many could benefit from having on the bench just in case their main guy faces a top-tier defense and doesn't do too well. And yes, I am looking directly at you Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson owners. We all have talked in the past about the lack of appeal when it comes to fantasy receivers on this team because the ball gets spread out so much. But combine that with the passing volume in Washington, and you get the perfect formula for an underrated yet reliable fantasy performer. And that's what we've seen with Howell. Howell is 4th in the NFL in pass attempts and 6th in passing yards with over 1,300. but the turnovers are obviously a nagging issue. We've seen the benefits of that volume considering that Howell has cleared 19 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 contests. But okay, Corey, how do we know that Sam Howell will keep up these performances where he's throwing the ball around 40 times per game? Well, having quite literally one of the worst defenses in the entire league will help. The Commanders are allowing 32 points per game through 5 weeks, the second highest mark in the league, and they just gave up a 40-burger to a Bears offense that was swirling with question marks until the week prior. Howell is in a spot where he's going to have to work from behind a ton. And those receivers he's working with, it's not a bad cast, comprised of a 3-time 1,000-yard receiver in Terry McLaurin, someone who had a breakout rookie year in 2022 in Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel. Not to mention Logan Thomas is turning back the clock. He looks revitalized despite being well over 30 years of age. A pass-heavy scheme, a motive to keep it that way with such a poor defense on the other side of the ball, and a top half wide receiver room, that's a recipe for success. Don't overthink this one. Last but not least, we have Trevor Lawrence. On first glance, Lawrence is at an underwhelming start to the season, considering the offensive upgrades the Jags got, and even talks of Lawrence himself being in the MVP conversation following last year's performance. Lawrence has just 5 passing touchdowns through as many games, but let's look at who he's gone up against so far. Lawrence is sitting as the QB 16 at the time of this recording, so ahead of the Monday night game, and his best performance of the season was in week 1 when he put up 17.7 fantasy points against the Colts. Since then, he has gone toe-to-toe with the Chiefs, Texans, Falcons, and Bills. Heading into week 5, those teams were 1st, 6th, 9th, and 16th. In terms of least amount of fantasy points allowed to the position, he has gone through a fantasy gauntlet. The schedule gets a bit easier from a passing defense perspective for Lawrence. We've got the Steelers, Colts, and Titans twice ahead. What's also great is, knock on wood, the phenomenal skill players around him are still healthy. This team just had to play a bunch of ugly games to go 3-2 over a tough 5-game opening stretch. This team is also very well balanced thanks to the production it has seen from Travis Etienne, especially last week when he broke out against the Bills. So defenses won't be able to entirely sell out on the pass to contain Lawrence. All signs point towards his value lifting off in the next couple of weeks. Before he does, buy low and trade for him. Thank you so much for watching. As always, make sure you ask me any questions you may have about trades or just fantasy football in general in the comments section below. Like and subscribe if we're helping you out as we roll into week 6, and we will see you in the next video.